For many criminals, sentence to years in a maximum security prison means justice has been served. However, some of these criminals are so hardened that the scheming and plotting never stops, and these people are ready to do all it takes to reclaim their freedom, even at the expense of another human's life. In this video, we'll explore the details of the 17 inmates killed in a Mexican prison and just how deadly criminal gangs can be.
Relatives of inmates flocking to the prison demanding information.
Pues queremos una solución, por lo menos que nos den un pormenor de cómo se encuentran ellos adentro.
The Mexican drug cartel. Before delving into the main part of this video, it only makes sense to share some insights into the country that is Mexico. This picturesque nation is known for many beautiful things, including an awe-inspiring history, excellent meals and drinks, striking beaches, and, let's not forget, impressive Mayan temples. However, it isn't just sunshine and roses. Mexico also has a long history of drugs, cartels, and criminal violence that never ends well for those involved, and even innocent bystanders. Mexican drug cartels are the leading suppliers of illicit drugs and narcotics like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine to the United States. Following the launch of the Mexican drug war in 2006, Mexico has become a battleground between the government and these cartels, with more than 275,000 people killed over the years due to this conflict. Some cartels involved include the Gulf Cartel, Los Zetas, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, La Familia Michoacana, and Los Rojos. Then there's the infamous Sinaloa Cartel, one of the oldest and most influential drug trafficking groups in Mexico, and a long-standing rival of the Juarez Cartel, another well-known drug trafficking group. Unfortunately, arresting and detaining members of these gangs does nothing to quell the brutality that exists in these criminals, and most Mexican detention centers experience more than their fair share of violence among inmates from rival gangs. Aside from internal conflicts, most Mexican prisons have also experienced numerous prison breaks, often orchestrated by cartels whose members have been remanded by the police. The latest was the Ciudad Juarez prison jailbreak that happened in January 2023. This jailbreak caused quite a stir locally and internationally, not just because it happened across the US border, just a short distance from El Paso, Texas, but also because of how brutally it was executed. New Year's Day breakout. On January 1st, 2023, just early hours of a beautiful Sunday morning, when everyone seemed to be celebrating the new year, men in armored vehicles drove to the Quereso No. 3 state prison in Ciudad Juarez. They opened fire on unsuspecting guards who stood at the prison entrance. According to reports by the El Diario de Juarez newspaper, 25 armed men had arrived at the prison launching a military-style attack, which instantly killed 2 guards at the entrance, where visitors had been waiting to enter. However, that was not all. They also shot into dormitories, which, as expected, led to chaos among inmates. Just moments before the attack on the prison, some officers of the municipal police were held under siege as armed men fired at them along a nearby boulevard. Although they were able to counter the attack, they chased the armed men and even killed 2 of them who had been riding in an SUV and arrested 4 others. However, this was merely a distraction, a diversion to capture the police's attention. According to the Chihuahua State Attorney General's office, the result was the brutal killing of 10 guards and 7 inmates, while leaving 13 others gravely wounded. Although it may seem weird initially, there was only one possible explanation for why these gang members would open fire on a prison facility without reason, and the answer was provided shortly. At least 24 inmates managed to escape amidst the chaos, including the leader of a Ciudad Juarez local gang.
Entre los que se escaparon se encuentran Ernesto Alfredo Piñón. Este es el líder de este grupo criminal conocido como El Neto.
Clearly, the audacious attack on the Ciudad Juarez prison was a deliberate attempt to free Ernesto Alfredo Piñón de la Cruz, popularly known among gangs as El Neto. Ernesto was the leader of the Los Mexicles gang and the mastermind behind the August 2022 shooting at the same prison, which left 11 people dead. El Neto, criminal mastermind. Tagged Black Thursday, this gang-related brawl was carried out to ensure the crime boss wasn't transferred to a more restrictive prison. This brawl didn't just stop at the prison, it spread into the streets of Ciudad Juarez, with members of these gangs engaging in random public shootings, killing 4 radio station employees who were simply doing a promotion at a restaurant. As if that was not enough, they went ahead to set gas stations ablaze and blocked the streets. It was so bad that schools and businesses had to be shut down due to safety concerns. However, it seemed to send the intended message, as El Neto Ernesto remained in the Quereso No. 3 state prison. Just 5 months later, this same man would be the reason why another bloody attack was orchestrated on New Year's Day. And all for what? A criminal who simply refused to accept the consequences of his actions. However, this bullheadedness doesn't really come as a surprise, considering Ernesto had always lived a life of crime and thuggery. Born on April 6, 1989, Ernesto already had his hands dirty with crime even before he was an adult. He was well known in the criminal underworld, and when he was just 18 years old, he was already identified as a violent criminal leader who led robberies, kidnappings, and murders across the state of Chihuahua. El Neto was such a ruthless criminal leader that he was known for shipping the heads of his victims in coolers. Eventually, he was arrested in 2009 after the Mexican state of Chihuahua discovered he was connected with 30 kidnappings, including a judge. In 2010, just a day before his sentencing, his gang members attempted a breakout by attacking the convoy taking him to court. However, they were unsuccessful, as El Neto was wounded in the process, but that didn't deter them from trying to free their leader even after he was sentenced to 224 years in prison on December 14, 2010. A trail of violence. Sometime in February 2020, he was appointed leader of Los Mexicles, a street gang based in Ciudad Juárez. He replaced the former leader Jesus Eduardo El Lalo Soto Rodriguez, who had just been transferred out of prison. The Los Mexicles were not just a notorious street gang, they also worked with the Sinaloa cartel, formerly headed by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Loera, one of the most powerful drug traffickers the world has ever seen. They had also aligned with the Caborca cartel, founded by the infamous Rafael Caro Quintero, a drug lord currently awaiting extradition to the US, where he is accused of the 1986 kidnapping and murder of Kiki Camarena, a Drug Enforcement Administration agent. With such affiliations, it is little wonder why Ernesto was revered in the criminal underworld and seemed capable of pulling off such heinous breakouts. In fact, it seemed that he was following the footsteps of his predecessor. Although imprisoned since 2009, El Lalo still seemed to rule the streets. Even though he was behind bars in Quefereso 15, located in Villa Comaltitan in the state of Chiapas, he orchestrated and controlled all illegal activities in the city. He even led fights for the control of the prison against a rival gang known as Los Aztecas. Around 2017 and 2019, he orchestrated bloody riots that killed 17 and 26 people respectively. Unfortunately, luck was not on Ernesto's side this time, because even though his henchmen succeeded in helping him escape from prison on the 1st of January 2023, he didn't live long enough to ensure the freedom he got at such an expensive price. Although Ernesto had managed to escape with his second-in-command, Cesar El Chilin Vega Munoz, who shared a cell with him at the Quereso No. 3 state prison, Cesar was killed before the attack ended. Cesar El Chilin Vega. Like Ernesto, at just 22 years of age, Cesar was already a well-known criminal and the second highest-ranking member of the Los Mexicles gang. On September 15, 2009, he and 7 of the Los Mexicles members had abducted a certain Natividad Torres at his Ciudad Juárez home. They kidnapped him and demanded $47,000 for Torres' release, but just got $700, a 2008 Toyota, and a television. Perhaps vexed by how unsuccessful the kidnap attempt was, Torres was shot 4 times and was then released the next day. Although Cesar was arrested in September, Torres unfortunately didn't survive the gunshot injury sustained, and he died on October 21st. On the other hand, Cesar was sentenced to 42 years in prison, but managed to flee the Mexican authorities in December 2010 after the prison van he was being transported in was ambushed. Cesar fled to the USA, where he began to live illegally in Socorro, Texas, and worked as a cook at a fried chicken restaurant in El Paso. Unfortunately, he wasn't so lucky, as he was arrested by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Homeland Security Investigations agents on December 27th, just days after he had escaped the Mexican authorities. At the time, he was only arrested for illegally re-entering the country after he had been deported in April 2009 when he tried getting in at Isleta port of entry with another person's entry documents. After his arrest, he was discovered to be wanted in Mexico for escape and other criminal charges, and he was deported back to Mexico. According to Dennis A. Ulrich, a special agent in charge of ICE HSI in El Paso, HSI special agents aggressively pursue individuals who pose a threat to public safety, especially criminal aliens who try to blend into our communities to elude justice in their home countries. One would think that after discovering that the odds were against him, Cesar would accept his fate. However, he was still willing to escape the Quereso No. 3 state prison, which ended badly for him. Criminal influence in the prison. On the other hand, Ernesto showed no sign of giving up, even after losing his right-hand man as he escaped, leading to a massive nationwide manhunt for the fugitive. The Mexican Defense Secretary Luis Crescencio had even announced that a unit of almost 1,000 troops from the army, state police, and National Guard were deployed to find El Neto. At the time he was being hunted down, Mexican authorities discovered that Ernesto did in fact live like a king, even while locked up in a prison cell. According to Luis, the soldiers and state police who regained the control of the prison after the attacks discovered 10 VIP cells.
Now, the Secretary of National Defense in Mexico speaking about the attack, saying money equal to around $90,000 was found inside a prison cell he refers to as a VIP cell.
Apparently, El Neto enjoyed the comforts of a 5-star hotel in his cell. A safe was found filled with cash and television, and he even had phone access and other comforts that showed he clearly ruled the Correctional No. 3 state prison. The discoveries didn't just end there, though. The authorities also found methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, marijuana, and even fentanyl inside the prison. Just outside the prison, 14 sophisticated guns were found. These discoveries were not only shocking, they were also a slap in the face of the Mexican government, which had always been intent on ensuring the country's security from these gangs. It was pretty surprising how these criminals were bold enough to sneak in guns, luxury items, and even drugs without being caught. Even though a search had supposedly been carried out in 2021, they even held keys to specific sections of the facility, which indicated a level of collaboration among the police wardens and prisoners. Aftermath of the breakout. Whether these contrabands were brought in after the 2021 search, one thing was evident. These criminals were not scared one bit of the authorities. According to Nestor Manuel Armendariz, president of the Human Rights Commission in the northern state of Chihuahua, it was evident that the inmates themselves were practically in charge of security, and that on some cell blocks they had the keys to common areas, like classrooms or cafeterias. Perhaps in a bid to correct this error that shows they clearly weren't winning the war against insecurity and these drug cartels, the Mexican authorities fired the director of the Correctional No. 3 state prison on January 3, 2023. They moved 191 inmates suspected to be high risk to other penitentiaries across Mexico to avoid a copycat attack. However, this act could not dissuade the public from noticing just how poorly managed the prison was. The New Year's Day jail breakout wasn't just the first attack on the prison. The Correctional No. 3 state prison reportedly had a long history of violence that often spilled into the streets. It also didn't help that the prison was overcrowded, holding about 4,000 inmates, more than its designated capacity, designed to hold a maximum of 3,135 inmates. This only made it easier for El Neto to carry out his dastardly act. Knowing that causing chaos in an already crowded place filled with the most dangerous criminals would be the perfect getaway plan. Eventually, the names of the inmates who escaped during El Neto's breakout were released, as well as the names of the guards who had been killed in the shootout that ensued. However, it is unclear if all the fugitives were members of Los Mexicles. Capture and death of El Neto. The names of the murdered jail guards were released. The investigation and hunt for the escaped fugitives was so intense that posters were put out with the names and faces of the inmates who escaped. Members of the public were also offered 300,000 to 5 million pesos, which converted to USD was between $15,500 and $284,128, as long as they could provide truthful, effective, efficient, and useful information that could directly lead to the fugitives' capture. Thankfully, January 5th, 2023 was a lucky day for the Ciudad Juarez police, as they were able to track the whereabouts of El Neto to a block of houses in the Azteca neighborhood, just 4 days after his sensational escape. Even after the police had discovered his hideout, El Neto seemed unwilling to be caught as he engaged in a standoff for the police. There was an exchange of gunfire until the cartel enforcer fled in a vehicle, but sadly crashed into a gas station. While there, he continued to fire at the authorities even though he was surrounded. Unfortunately, he was fatally injured during the standoff and was captured, but the police refused to take him to a hospital first, as they feared it would be a target for his henchmen to come to free him once again. Instead, they decided to take him to the Northern District Prosecutor's office, where he would be treated by medical personnel, but he died on arrival. He was just 33 years old. According to a tweet by the Chihuahua State Governor, Maru Campos, he was located, chased, he was injured, but on the way to the State Attorney General's office, he died. Just like that, the reign of one of the deadliest generators of violence in Ciudad Juarez was ended. State of Mexican prisons. Still, the death of the notorious cartel enforcers was not enough solace for the family and relatives of those who had been killed during the New Year's Day attack. Not only were law enforcement guards killed, leaving behind a trail of sorrow and pain for their families to bear, but the Correctional No. 3 state prison also held prisoners who were simply awaiting trial for minor crimes. Unfortunately, some weren't so lucky, as they lost their lives in this jailbreak attempt. Saskia Niño de Rivera, leader of the incarceration reform group, somewhat blamed the authorities for what had occurred on that fateful day, stating, insisting that they had always preferred to look the other way. According to her, Sunday's riot is a clear example of what is occurring in a large number of Mexican prisons, which are completely forgotten by the authorities and which are completely out of control. And she's right. You see, cartel leaders in Mexico have a history of flipping the table when they face the threat of imprisonment. Seriously, some of the stuff they've done to avoid prison is something you'd think was only possible in Hollywood. Just in 2016, the notorious Topo Chico prison in the northern border state of Nuevo León was home to a bloody riot that left 49 inmates dead. Upon investigation, it was discovered that the prison was filled with contraband and weapons that certainly shouldn't have been there. Thankfully, the prison was closed in 2019. However, this cannot always be the solution for all prison riots and prison breaks that happen in the country. But perhaps the most notorious of such cases in recent times was the resistance of the Sinaloa cartel to the arrest of Ovidio Guzman. Ovidio El Raton Guzman Lopez is a well-known Mexican drug lord and a high-ranking Sinaloa cartel member. He is also the son of the infamous drug lord Joaquin El Chapo Guzman Loera. Ovidio Guzman El Raton. It is alleged that Ovidio Guzman has been involved in his father's drug trafficking business since 2008. Despite their illegal dealings, this family is well known for always eluding capture, regardless of the several indictments slammed on them. For instance, Ovidio Guzman escaped full persecution when he was first arrested on October 17, 2019 by members of the National Guard in Culiacán. Following his arrest, armed men from the Sinaloa cartel sparked a resistance movement, setting off several gun battles across the city.
Violence paralyzed the streets of a Mexican city yesterday as security forces traded gunfire with heavily armed members of a drug cartel. The son of the notorious drug kingpin El Chapo was taken into custody, then let go.
These heavily armed men were willing to do all it took to ensure Ovidio Guzman was released, as they started to threaten mass civilian deaths, shoot at Mexican security forces, and even threatened to attack an apartment complex that housed relatives of the local military personnel. Blazing vehicles were strewn across the road. Prisoners had escaped a city prison. A gas station was set ablaze, and terrified residents were scampering around for their safety. Just before he was taken to prison, Ovidio was freed in an attempt to prevent lives from being lost. According to Mexico's security minister, Alfonso Durazo, the decision was taken to retreat from the house without Guzman to try to avoid more violence in the area and preserve the lives of our personnel and recover calm in the city. To show just how unforgiving and extremely brutal these cartels can be, a police officer involved in the botched arrest of Ovidio Guzman was shot dead on November 8th, just 3 weeks after the operation. Identified as Eduardo N., the 30-year-old police officer was seen in CCTV footage parking his vehicle outside a shopping center when a red car pulled up on him. Some men came out of the car and opened fire. Within 30 seconds, Eduardo N. had received 155 gunshots before the gunman entered their vehicle and drove off. But that was not the end. Ovidio was again captured on January 5th, 2023 in the Jesus Maria district of the Culiacán area of Mexico. As expected, the city was again ridden by violence as members of the Sinaloa cartel resisted his arrest for the second time. Residents were being carjacked, planes were being attacked at the local airport, and these cartel members blocked exits to several cities.
Ovidio Guzman, El Chapo's oldest son, considered the leader of the cartel's fentanyl division. Since his arrest on Thursday, Mexican media now reporting 10 soldiers killed along with 19 cartel operatives.
El Chapo's infamous escapes. Clearly, members of the Sinaloa cartel were not taking his arrest lightly, as Culiacán, especially the Jesus Maria area, was hit by several gun battles between cartel members and security forces. It got so bad that the fuselage of a plane about to take off was hit by gunfire. During the attack, thankfully no one was harmed, but it showed that the city was under siege, and these attackers weren't backing down. You can only imagine how vicious these cartels can be, for 29 people to be killed simply because a criminal desires freedom so much. These attacks from members of the Sinaloa cartel regarding the arrest of Ovidio Guzman aren't surprising, considering that his father, El Chapo, has a record of escaping the police. In fact, El Chapo has successfully escaped prison twice, and the story of his escape is pretty famous. He was first arrested on June 9, 1993, in connection with the May 1993 murder of the Cardinal and Archbishop Posadas Ocampo at the Guadalajara International Airport. On January 19, 2001, El Chapo bribed the guards at his prison to help with his escape, and one of them, Francisco El Chito Camberas Rivera opened El Chapo's electronically operated cell door. A maintenance worker rolled him out the front door through a laundry cart, and from there, he was transported via the trunk of a car out of town. From 2001, there was a massive manhunt for El Chapo, but he was so slick that he managed to evade the police for 13 years and a month. However, he was arrested on February 22, 2014, in a hotel in Mazatlan, but being a daredevil, he made a second escape on July 11, 2015. According to security at the Federal Social Rehabilitation Center No. 1, Altiplano, where he was being held, the drug lord had been seen around 8:52 p.m., close to the cell's shower area. The shower area had no cameras installed for privacy purposes, so the security officials couldn't see him. However, they started to get worried when he hadn't emerged from the shower area after 25 minutes. When they got to his cell, they discovered he had escaped through a tunnel leading from the shower area to a house construction site 1.5 kilometers away in Santa Juanita. The security officials also found a ladder and a motorcycle, which he used in riding through the tunnel. Eventually, the ever-elusive El Chapo was arrested again on January 8, 2016, and he was extradited to the US on January 17, 2017. There, he was sentenced to life in prison on July 17, 2019, after being found guilty on all indictment charges.
We move on to breaking news on El Chapo. The cartel boss was sentenced today to life in prison without parole, and this comes after a jury found him guilty back in February on all counts of smuggling tons of drugs into the U.S.
Unfortunately, despite knowing how dangerous these gang members can be, it's fairly safe to say that they are overlooked when placing them in overcrowded prisons with minimal security and guards to run the place properly. And the result is always unpleasant. Even though El Neto never got the chance to enjoy the freedom he desired, there's no denying that the 17 people killed in a Mexican prison are just one of the many avoidable deaths between the Mexican government and criminal gangs. As long as these cartels and gangs continue to exist in Mexico, this bloody war will be far from over.